Right. Um, Trying to collect my thoughts. Several times now I've tried today to think about projections and coupling systems and a little bit about condition systems. I was looking at causes on Facebook and how simple the presentation was. And I thought that our thing has to be as simple. But it's a very complex system. It's a very complex system indeed. Because we're trying to effectively kind of simulate flow. And it's not just even flow of particles of water, particles of hydrogen, oxygen, it's molecules, it's intentions and feelings and thoughts. And there's lots of dimensions to it. It's not a physical 3, if you include time, 4 dimensions. It's got like loads. The complexity of water, where you have one kind of stream within another. So if you have, for example, water coming out of a tap, you know, the way that different pressures, you get different patterns in the water. So in the same way you get a stream, you're going to have parts of that stream that flow almost like contingent parts. And they form part of a larger whole simultaneously. So in the same way you're going to have a projection, there's going to be some people working on this projection, and it's going to be part of a larger projection. And things will be running concurrently, and how that is organized, I suppose. Not organized, represented. Yeah, and organized. How do you relate that? Because there'll be certain projections that are sequential in time. You know, we have to achieve this before we achieve this, before we achieve that. But there are several that are simultaneous at different levels. Different levels of scale. So I thought, okay, I'll start with something simple, and I'll look at the coupling system. And I was thinking that what you'd have is you just have your declensions. You know, this is my specific declension, the Enneagram declension. This is the chakra declension. This is the Myers-Briggs declension. And I could actually just show you the number of people that define themselves this way. It might show you the various projections that are these are being used in. But then you actually have to think about, well, which specific declensions are you using to be able to work with and define a certain number of people with respect to a specific projection? I mean, if you've got a little projection that's only got like 8 or 9 people, then I can imagine that you have a declension and other people have their declensions. And you filled in theirs and they filled in yours, and so you're kind of happy. You have a kind of a representation of all the different people's contributions, their different values in their declensions, and how they complement one another for this specific projection, and that effectively creates a team. And that's your coupling system. But that's quite tricky. How do you represent that? And if you're going to be sitting there using Facebook or something, and then you get an invitation to fill in the declension, you know, specific to a projection, does that mean that you've allowed yourself to be approached? You're receptive to being approached by anybody in that projection? Well, what happens if that projection has got like hundreds of people? Can they just kind of bore other people by constantly sending them off new declensions to fill in. And of course, there are certain declensions, or there are certain projections that are so vast, maybe, let's say 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people. And the idea that they could just be sending off to everybody, or each one of those 1,000,000 people, declensions to fill in, it would just be like hell. And that's just the declension system, that's just the coupling system. But you can kind of understand the complexity of proteins and how they can combine, and how, I don't know, how viruses engage other cells, and how the protein codes interlock, or how proteins form in the first place, and enzymes, and how they work, and white blood cells. And it's very complex stuff, and it's taking scientists quite a while to just examine these things. And here we want a very simple representation. It's not even physical, it's virtual. It's based on words and thoughts, and it's gonna be hellish. So how can you kind of make that simple? We want the full functionality and yet the simplicity. There's got to be a couple of simple things in there that we just want to represent. That's all. Maybe we have to have some quite strong defining parameters. Who's allowed to ask other people to fill in their declension. Maybe you have to be invited to do so. Once you've been invited to enter into it, and you're actually part of a working stream within a projection. Does that make some kind of sense? So, you can easily take part in confluence or influence, projection. There's 12 people there, they're interested in this projection, so you join it. It doesn't mean that you're actually doing anything with it, you're just kind of on the outskirts of it. And maybe one of them, the people that are already involved, perhaps the originator, can invite you to fill in a declension. And if you're interested, then you can, because you've been invited in, you can fill in it and ask if other people want to do this declension. That's quite interesting. And once you've been passed as okay by, say, the originator, then you become, a full member with equal status with everybody else. And then you can send off various things to any of them if you want. Or perhaps you're only allowed to communicate with people who you're friends with in Facebook already, which means that you might be interested in a specific projection with a bunch of other people, but it's only once. No. You should be able to have some kind of engagement with them, find out if you're compatible, and then if you are, do you see there's kind of levels to this, levels of commitment, involvement,